Okay, so today we're going to take a look at the official report by the National Transportation Safety Board. This is going to be the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sinking in Lake Superior. Now, I will put a link in the description if you want to view the reports. You can even download them and you can make an opinion for yourself. So this has the official links to the docket. Incidentally, the docket has not been released. It has a link, but when you hit it, it shows that it's not released, so it's not available. But below that, we got the reports, and then we have all the recommendations that follow. For sake of time for the video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the report with you, and I'll share the last recommendation. And below that, you can see the web address or the contact address. So when we go to the report itself, this is the National Transportation Safety Board from Washington, D.C., 20594, and this is the Marine Accident Report on the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sinking in Lake Superior on November 10th of 1975. Report number is NTSB MAR 783. So when you go down, you see the technical report document page. Number 1 is the report number. Again, it's NTSB MAR 783. And below that, the title is the Marine Accident Report for the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sinking in Lake Superior on November 10th of 1975. And the report date in box 5 is May 4th of 1978. Below that, in box 10, we have the working unit number, which was 2291C. So the performance organization name and address of the National Transportation Safety Board, the Bureau of Accident Investigation, Washington, D.C., 20594. Now, box 16, it says abstract. At about 1915, on November 10th of 1975, the Great Lakes bulk carrier vessel SS Edmund Fitzgerald, fully loaded with a cargo of taconite pellets, sank in eastern Lake Superior in position 46 degrees 59 by 9 north by 85 degrees 6 by 6 west, approximately 17 miles from the entrance to Whitefish Bay, Michigan. The ship was en route from Superior, Wisconsin to Detroit, Michigan, and had been proceeding at a speed reduced in a severe storm. All the vessel's 29 officers and crew members are missing and presumed dead. No distress call was heard by vessels or shore stations. The Safety Board considered many factors during the investigation, including stability, hull strength, operating practices, adequacy of weathertight closures, hatch cover strength, possible grounding, vessel design, loading practices, and weather forecasting. The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of this accident was a sudden massive flooding of cargo hold due to the collapse of one or more hatch covers. Before the hatch covers collapsed, flooding into the ballast tanks and tunnel through the topside damage and flooding into the cargo hold through non-weathertight hatch covers caused a reduction of freeboard and a list. The hydrostatic and hydrodynamic forces imposed the hatch covers by heavy boarding seas, and this reduced the freeboard, and with the list caused the hatch covers to ultimately collapse. Contributing to the accident was a lack of transverse weathertight bulkheads in the cargo hold and a reduction of freeboard authorized by the 1969, 71, and 73 amendments to the Great Lakes Load Line Regulations. Below that, in box 17, the keywords, we got Great Lakes, bulk cargo vessel, flooding, foundering, sinking, load line, hatch covers, buoyancy, stability, Lake Superior, weathertight closures, hatch cover design, freeboard, sea state prediction, subdivision bilge system. Then box 18, this document is available to the public through the National Technical Information Service, Springfield, Virginia, 22151. And this is unclassified. Box 21, the number of pages are 51. So the next section we're going to go and check out is the contents. So we have the introduction, The synopsis: the investigation, which includes the accident, crew information, vessel information, cargo information, meteorological information, the wreckage, the survival aspect, the waterway information, tests and research, other information, which includes the operating instructions and the navigation information. Following that, the analysis. We got the sinking, the possible grounding, probable track line, other safety-related findings, fathometers, charts, grounding at cargo facilities, weather forecasting, loading information, vessel design, emergency position, indicating radio beacons, and the search and rescue. Below that, we have the conclusions, we got the findings, the probable cause, and we have recommendations. Now again, I'm not going to read the whole report to you word by word because it would just take way too long. I just want to point out some of the information, highlight the things that we're going to take a look at. So the investigation, I'm going to read this to you, adopted May 4th of 1978 from the Marine Accident Report. This casualty was investigated by the United States Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation, which convened in Cleveland, Ohio on November 18th of 1975. A representative of the National Transportation Safety Board observed part of the proceedings. The Safety Board was and has considered all facts pertinent to the Safety Board's statutory responsibility to determine the cause, a probable cause, of the casualty, and to make recommendations. The Safety Board's recommendations are made independently of any recommendations proposed by the Coast Guard. To assure public knowledge of all Safety Board recommendations, all such recommendations are published in a Federal Register. If the Coast Guard does not accept some of these Safety Board recommendations, the Coast Guard is required to set forth in detail the reasons for such refusal. This is one of the means by which the Safety Board exercises its responsibility in assessing the safety, operating, and regulatory practices of the United States Coast Guard. So I want to take a look at some of the vessel information. The Fitzgerald was one of a fleet of 14 to 18 vessels operated by the Columbia Transportation Division between 1972 and 1977. The Coast Guard casualty records for the company fleet did not reveal any heavy weather damage during this period. The Fitzgerald was a conventional, straight-decker, Great Lakes bulk cargo vessel, see Figure 2. It was 729 feet long, 75 feet in breadth, 39 feet in depth, 13,632 gross tons, and 8,686 net tons. It was propelled by a 7,500 horsepower steam turbine and was built as Hull 301 at the Great Lakes Engineering Works, River Rouge, Michigan in 1958. The vessel was owned by Northeastern Mutual Life Insurance Company and operated by the Columbia Transportation Division of the Ogle Bay Norton Company. The vessel had 860,950 cubic foot cargo hold, divided by two non-watertight transverse screen bulkheads. Outboard and below the cargo hold were the 8 ballast tanks divided at the center line into port and starboard tanks, see Figure 2. The forward deck house contained a pilot house and accommodations for the deck crew. The engineering was left aft, above which were the rest of the accommodations and the crew's messing facilities. Below the weather deck, above the ballast tanks, were 2 tunnels, one port and one starboard, used for access between the accommodation areas during the adverse weather. The shear strake extended 15 3/8 inches above the weather deck at the side and was connected to the stringer plate by a riveted gunwale bar. There are 21 cargo hatch openings. Each opening measured 11 feet longitudinally by 48 feet transversely and had a 24-inch coaming above the weather deck. Each opening was made weathertight by a single piece of steel hatch cover. The hatch covers were made of 5 16th inch stiffened plate with a 9 16th inch rubber gasket around the underside of the plate's perimeter. Each hatch cover was secured by 68 manually operated Kessner clamps arranged on 2-foot centers. Each clamp had an adjustable bolt which determined the force applied by the individual clamp and therefore controlled the deflection of the hatch cover. The compression of the rubber gasket and the weather tightness of the hatch opening, there was no written procedures concerning maintenance or adjustments of the hatch clamps or gaskets. An electrically operated hatch cover crane, which ran rails outboard of the cargo hatch openings, was used for lifting the hatch covers. Access to the cargo hold was provided through two 30-inch hatches through the weather deck located on the screen bulkheads fitted on 24-inch coamings. Through doors from the tunnels and through doors at the main deck level, the deck level below the weather deck, at the forward and aft ends of the cargo hold. Two 8-inch diameter vent plates, which extended 18 inches above the weather deck, were fitted for each ballast tank. The port and starboard access tunnels had similar vents extending 30 inches above the weather deck, located forward and aft. In addition, each ballast tank was fitted with a remote water level indicator device called a king gauge, located in a lower engineering near the ballast pumps. The only means of detecting water in a cargo hold or access tunnel was by visual inspection. Federal regulations do not require that Great Lake vessels be equipped with instruments to indicate trim or list. The bilge or ballast system consisted of a piping system connected through manifolds and valving to four 7,000 gallon per minute main pumps and two 2,000 gallon per minute auxiliary pumps. The ballast systems could be used to dewater the cargo hold through two suctions located at the aftermast end of number 3 cargo hold, port and starboard. The tunnels could be drained by manually operated drains connected to the ballast tanks. Following, radio telephone equipment was located in the pilot house and chart room. Two VHF FM 12-channel 25-watt radio telephones operated from vessel's power. One VHF FM 12-channel 25-watt radio telephone operated from rechargeable batteries located in the pilot house. One AM 8-channel 100-watt radio telephone operated from the vessel's power. One AM emergency 50-watt radio telephone including channel 51, 2182 kilohertz. This operated from rechargeable batteries as well. The Fitzgerald also had a radio directional finder and two surface scan radar sets. No fathometer was required and none was installed. After her delivery in 1958, the Fitzgerald operated essentially unchanged until 1969, when a diesel-powered bow thruster was installed during the winter of 1971-1972. The main propulsion plant was converted from coal to oil, and the coal bunkers were converted to fuel oil tanks. An automatic boiler combustion and feedwater control system was installed as part of this conversion. Between 1958 and 1973, the Fitzgerald was permitted 3 reductions in the minimum freeboard required by 46 CFR Part 45. Freeboard on the Fitzgerald was the distance from the maximum draft permitted to the weather deck at the side. A comparison of the requirements for the Great Lakes cargo vessel for vessels operating on the oceans show that the vessels of similar dimensions, the freeboard required for a Great Lakes load line that required for ocean services would be approximately the same. However, the longitudinal strength required for the Great Lakes vessel is approximately 1/2 that required for the vessel in ocean service. The following table shows the freeboards assigned to the Fitzgerald. You can see the minimum required freeboard, the date, the midsummer, and the different parts of the season. So 46 CFR 45.5 states that midsummer freeboard applies May 1st through September 15th. The summer freeboard applies April 16th through April 30th, and the September 16th through the September 30th. Intermediate freeboard applies October 1st through October 31st, and April 1st through April 15th. And winter freeboard applies from November 1st to March 31st. So we got the chart for the required freeboard. During the winter layup of 1974-1975, while the Coast Guard was conducting the inspection for certification, the American Bureau of Shipping conducted an annual survey of the hull, machinery, and boilers, completed part of the continuous machinery survey, and conducted an annual load line inspection. These surveys were completed on April 9th of 1975 with no outstanding requirements that affected the structural integrity of the hull. The Fitzgerald was last inspected by the Coast Guard and the ABS on October 31st of 1975. 4 minor structural defects in the way of hatches were noted, and the East Coast Guard considered these defects to be repaired before the 1976 shipping season. The structural defects consisted of a 1-inch notch in a plate in way of hatch number 13, a 1-inch gouge in the plate in the way of hatch number 15, a 10-inch crack in number 16 hatch end girder, and a 1-inch crack at the intersection of number 21 hatch coaming and the hatch end girder. All 4 defects probably resulted in damage from offloading equipment and did not affect the strength of the hull girder. So now I want to take a look briefly at the cargo information. The Fitzgerald was carrying about 26,116 long tons of national taconite pellets. Taconite pellets are manufactured by a process known as oxide pelletizing. This process begins with the mining of iron ore, concentrated with the addition of bentonite, processed into balls of 3/8 inch to 5/8 inch diameters, and fired at temperatures of 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit to 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit, which changes its composition to relatively non-magnetic hematite. This process produces almost spherical pellets containing 67% iron, which are easily handled by belts and bulk carrier handling equipment. Taconite pellets weigh from 127 to 140 pounds per cubic foot and will absorb approximately 8 to 9 pounds or 6 to 7% by weight of water per cubic foot. This can contain up to 27.5 pounds of water in the interstitial void spaces in each cubic foot of pellets. The exhibit of angle of response, the angle of response being between the horizontal and the slope and the freestanding pile of the material of approximately 26 degrees, either wet or dry. Great Lakes bulk carriers are loaded to have little trim, heel, and midship deflection as possible. Cargo is distributed so that the vessel does not hog. However, 1 inch of sag is considered acceptable during loading. The crew monitors and forward-aft midship drafts. The small amounts of cargo are added at section locations to achieve the desired draft when the load is almost completed. On the upbound voyage en route to loading ports in the Upper Lakes, Great Lakes bulk carriers are water ballast to obtain the desired draft and trim to ensure sufficient vertical clearance upon arrival at the loading berth. During loading operations, the ballast water is pumped out at the same time the cargo is loaded to maintain the vertical clearances. So I'd like to take a look now, a brief look at the meteorological information. The weather system, on November 8th, 1975, a storm was generated over the Oklahoma Panhandle by 0700. On November 9th, the storm was centered over south central Kansas, and the National Weather Service predicted that the storm would travel in a northeasterly direction and pass just south of Lake Superior by 1900 on November 10th. So looking down towards the bottom, you can see that by 1900 hours on November 10th, as the storm center passed over the southern tip of the James Bay, Canada, the Anderson report winds from 300 degrees at 50 knots, waves of 16 feet. The Standard Rock reported wind west-northeast at 292.5 degrees at 40 knots, gusting to 65 knots. The highest winds recorded by Standard Rock were west-northwest at 56 knots, gusting to 66 knots at 1700 on November 10th. And the log of the Anderson shows the following on November 10th. 1, at 1350, just north of Michipicoten Island, the winds were northwest by west at 5 knots. Number 2, at 1445 west of Michipicoten Island, the winds were northwest at 42 knots. By 1520, just south of Michipicoten Island, the winds were northwest at 43 knots. And log entry number 4, at 1652, northeast of Caribou Island, the winds were northwest at 52 knots. The master of the Anderson testified that 10 to 12 miles north of Caribou Island, the seas were running 12 to 18 feet. South of Caribou Island, the seas were running 18 to 25 feet. He further testified that he observed wind gusts of 70 to 75 knots. The National Weather Service meteorologist testified that before the Fitzgerald sank, the average sustained wind speed of 45 knots from the northwest for a period of 6 to 7 hours, and that these conditions would produce waves of significant height of 15 feet. He also testified that there are usually 4 or 5 intense storms on the Great Lakes during the fall to spring shipping seasons. The storm of the intensity of one recorded on November 10th would not occur every year. However, more intense storms have been recorded on the Great Lakes. Okay, for sake of the length of this video, I'm going to go down to the conclusions now, and we're going to take a look at the findings. The Fitzgerald hatch covers were not weather-tight and allowed water to enter the cargo hold over an extended period. This water was not detected because it migrated down through the cargo. There was no method provided for sounding the cargo other than visual observations, nor was there any method for dewatering the cargo hold with the vessel trimmed by the bow. Amendments to the Great Lake Load Line Regulations in 1969, 70, 71, and 73 allow Great Lakes bulk carriers to load deeper. This deeper loading increased deck wetness, which caused an increase in the flooding rate through the non-weathertight hatches and other non-weathertight openings. The topside vents and fence rail were damaged before 1520, either by a heavy object coming adrift on deck or by a floating object coming aboard with the seas. Fitzgerald hull plating probably was damaged also. The damage propagated the caused flooding of the ballast tanks and tunnels. Flooding of ballast tanks in the tunnel caused trim and lists. Detection of ballast tank flooding prompted the ballast pumps to be started. However, the flooding rate through the hull damage, which was propagating, increased and exceeded the capacity of the pumping system. The hull stress levels, even with substantial amount of flooding, were low enough that the hull girder did not fail before the sinking. The forces on the hatch covers caused by boarding seas were sufficient to cause damage and collapse. These forces increased as flooding caused the list and reduced the vessel's freeboard. Flooding of the cargo hold caused by one or more collapsed hatch covers was massive and progressed throughout the hold. Flooding was so rapid that the vessel sank before the crew could transmit a distress call. The vessel either plunged or partially capsized and plunged under the surface. The hull failed either as the vessel sank or when the bow struck the bottom. The availability of a fathometer aboard the Edmund Fitzgerald would have provided additional navigational data and would have required less dependence on the Anderson for navigational assistance. The most probable track line of Fitzgerald went from west of Michipicoten Island to the position of a wreckage lies east of the shoals areas north and east of Caribou Island. Therefore, damage from grounding would have been unlikely. The shoal area north of Caribou Island is not shown in sufficient detail on Lake Survey Chart number 9 to indicate the extent of this hazard to navigation. A contour presentation of this hazard would allow mariners to better assess this area and would help to eliminate erroneous conclusion where they are isolated spots of shallow water, where in fact there is a large area of shoal water less than 10 fathoms deep. Insufficient water depth has been observed at some loading and discharge piers. Groundings of vessels at these locations induce hull stressors of unknown magnitudes and create the potential of undetected hull damage and wear. Although the National Weather Service accurately predicted the direction and velocity of the wind expected over the eastern end of Lake Superior on November 10th of 1975, the predicted wave heights were significantly less than those observed. Loading information on the Fitzgerald and other Great Lakes bulk carrier vessels was not adequate. Great Lakes bulk carrier vessels normally can avoid severe storms. Limiting sea state for Great Lakes bulk cargo vessels should be determined, and the operation of vessels in sea states above the limiting value should be restricted. The presence of the EPIRB board in Fitzgerald would have provided immediate automatic transmission of an emergency signal, which would have been allowed search units to locate the position of the accident. The accurate location of this position would have been reduced the extent of the search area. Installation of trim, the list indicating instruments on the Fitzgerald would have provided the master an early indicating of flooding and would have adverse effects on the vessel. These instruments would have given an indication of whether the master's correction action was adequate. And the surface search and rescue capability of the Coast Guard on November 10th was inadequate. The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of this accident was a sudden massive flooding of the cargo hold due to the collapse of one or more hatch covers. Before the hatch covers collapsed, flooding into the ballast tanks and tunnels through the topside damage and flooding into the cargo hold through the non-weather-tight hatch covers caused a reduction of freeboard and a list. Hydrostatic and hydrodynamic forces imposed on the hatch covers by heavy boarding ceased. At this reduced the freeboard, the list caused the hatch covers to ultimately collapse. Contributing to the accident was a lack of transverse watertight bulkheads in the cargo hold and a reduction of freeboard authorized by the 69, 71, and 73 amendments to the Great Lakes load line regulations. So they go on to put recommendations. I don't want to go through all of them because there's a lot of them for the sake of the length of this video. So I'm going to start with the first and we're going to go to the last. And if you want to read the rest in between, again, I'll provide the link. So as a result of its analysis of this accident, the National Transportation Safety Board made the following recommendations. To the United States Coast Guard, ensure that all hatch covers, coamings, and vents are in good repair and are capable of being made weathertight during the annual inspection of all Great Lakes bulk carrier vessels before the spring shipping season, and that inspections before the winter load line, Class 2 Priority Action, M7810, issued March 23rd of 1978. That's followed by the use of ship rider program by the Coast Guard Marine inspectors and hatch cover inspections at cargo loading facilities to prevent sailing of any vessel found lacking a weathertight integrity, Class 2 Priority Action M7811, which was issued on March 23rd of 1978. So I'm going to go to the last recommendation now. And again, this is downloadable. You can read it on the official website. So this was issued on June 1st of 1978. This is the safety recommendations. At about 1915, the November 10th, 1975, the Great Lakes bulk carrier vessel Edmund Fitzgerald with 29 crewmen, fully loaded with taconite pellets, sank in eastern Lake Superior at 46 degrees 59.9 north by 85 degrees 66 west. And again, this was part of the report. As part of the investigation into the cause of the sinking of the Fitzgerald, the Canadian Hydrographic Service performed a hydrographic survey of the water between Michipicoten Island and the Caribou Island, Lake Superior in 1976. Since this area is navigated by Great Lakes bulk carrier vessels, the updated hydrographic information determined by this survey should be included in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Lake Survey Chart Number 9. And consideration should be given to indicating the extent of the shoal area north of Caribou Island, known as the North Bank, where depths are between 5 and 10 fathoms. Testimony given during the investigation indicated that although the National Weather Service accurately predicted the direction, velocity of the wind expected over the eastern end of the Great Lake Superior, November 10th of 1975, the predicted wave heights were significantly less than those observed by the vessels in the area. For more detailed information about the incident, read the Marine Report. Therefore, the National Transportation Safety Board recommends that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration revise Lake Survey Chart Number 9, showing the areas between Michipicoten Island and Caribou Island in Lake Superior to reflect the findings of the survey performed by the Canadian Hydrographic Services, and to evaluate the current methods of forecasting wave heights in the Great Lakes to determine if these methods accurately predict eventual wave heights. King Chairman, McAdams, Hogue, and Driver members concurred in the above recommendations, and this is signed James B. King, the chairman. So I know there's a lot of information in this report to digest. And again, if you want to download it for yourself and read more, for the sake of the length of this video, I just wanted to add some of the things that I thought were important. Information on the ship, the cargo, the weather conditions, etc. So my friends, this is November. This is Edmund Fitzgerald month, and I thank you so much for watching. And until my next video, I'll talk to you guys soon.